Well, Veterans Day is this coming Tuesday, and I'd like to acknowledge anybody here who has served as a veteran. Anybody? We got one, two, three, four. Thank you. Um, it's one of those days that sometimes can kind of slip by with all the other things going on, but I definitely don't think that it should ever slip by. It's such an important day for us to remember in our country. We are in a sermon series on the book of Genesis, and the section that we are in at this time is about Jacob. He was the son of Isaac, the grandson of Abraham, and at this point in the story, he is now called Israel. He wrestled with God, if you remember that story, and got renamed. And so he has 12 sons, and those sons will eventually become the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, as we have seen, going all the way back into Abraham, this family is a big mess. Okay, there's no other way to say it. It's just a mess, and unfortunately, the dysfunction that has already happened gets passed along to the sons of Israel, and just like families today that have dysfunction in it, that gets passed along. You look back, and we've already talked about that. So how generational things happen like that. Nevertheless, out of this mess, we're going to see something about God that has been a big question forever, and that question is, where is God? Where is God, right? And it's been a question for all time. For all of history, people have asked that question. Where is God in those children, with those children who are starving in Africa? Where is God? I mean, you probably talked to some people that just ask you these questions. Where is God with all those people that are caught and trapped in sex trafficking? Just recently, where is God? Where was God in the middle of the hurricane that happened in Jamaica? Where's God when genocide is happening all around the world? And so we ask that question, where is God in the middle of that? And of course, where is God, very personally, right, when my world is falling apart? Where is God when things aren't going the way I had thought they should go, the way I had wanted them to go, the way I had planned for them to go? Where is God in the middle of that? It is one of the most common questions that we have. It's one of the most asked questions, if you will, of all time throughout our history. And the good news is this part of Genesis does as good a job, I think, of illustrating where God is. Okay? And so I want, as we go through this, I hope that that's going to be the thing that's going to continue to show itself throughout this particular passage. So if you have a Bible or the sermon notes, go ahead and turn to Genesis chapter 37, and we're going to start in verse 2, and it says this. This is the account of Jacob's family. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. Now, the first thing that we see at this part of the story is that Israel, also known as Jacob, right? We're going to just keep using Israel, and hopefully that settles in. But Israel loved Joseph, it says, more than any other of the other sons. And the crazy thing is that Israel grew up desperately looking for love and affirmation from his father. You remember Isaac loved Esau and did not show any love, really, to Jacob at the time, now Israel. But like I said, history has a way of repeating itself, especially when we see generations of problems happening, right? And so now Israel has chosen his favorite. Now, if you remember the story, Israel tried to compensate for his daddy issues. He had daddy issues, right? He tried to compensate for them by marrying Rachel. She was beautiful. She was going to be the answer to all of his problems and all that kind of stuff. and he got married to her. So they got married. But one problem happened. Rachel was not able, she struggled having children. So Jacob ended up having 3 other wives, which is not a good thing. And don't use that as, well, did in the Bible. No, it's not a good thing in the Bible. But he did that. And out of those 3 other wives, he had 10 other sons. Okay? Now, fortunately, Rachel did eventually get pregnant, and she gave Israel his 2 youngest sons. Joseph being one of them, now his favorite, and then Benjamin. We didn't cover this part, I skipped over it, but sadly, tragedy struck when Rachel was giving birth to Benjamin. She died, okay? That's a really sad part of the story. But what we see here is that Joseph, Rachel's oldest son, has become Israel's favorite, and he showed him by doing what? Giving him this richly ornate robe. Now, you may have heard of a play that's called Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, right? Well, that's from this story. And it's a little bit of an extension of the words that actually, I mean, the translation could mean Technicolor, or as it says here, ornate. But nevertheless, the bottom line is that this coat was worth a lot. It was a valuable coat. Back then, there was value in clothing and stuff, and so this was what he demonstrated, his love, Israel demonstrated. And basically, Israel gave expensive things to Joseph that he didn't give to any of his other children. One more thing here before we move on about Joseph. It says in verse 2 that he brought their father, what? A bad report of his brothers. The phrase bad report actually is better to say he lied or he misrepresented some way, or maybe he was just snitching on them. But the bottom line, he didn't gain their favor, right? Because he was telling his dad, bringing this bad report. And so how do you think his brothers felt about him? Well, we don't have to worry, or we don't have to think about it. It says so in verse 4. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him. Pretty strong, right? They hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. You've heard of the phrase teacher's pet? Well, father's pet. I mean, I don't know that we use that one a lot, but that's clearly what was happening. And listen, Israel, like I said, should have learned by his father's favoritism towards his brother, but here he's just guilty of the same things. And actually, things get worse. Check this out. Joseph said to his brothers, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. His brothers said to him, do you intend to rule over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream. Now, as we're going to see, God often spoke to Joseph through dreams. That's one of the things that really marks Joseph's life, and it's a beautiful thing, which, by the way, is something that God still does today. And just like this one, God typically uses symbols. He uses things like wheat and sheaves of grain to be symbols in our dreams and stuff. And so, as a side note, I just want to throw it out there to you. If you're somebody who's had a dream that's been recurring, it doesn't make sense, it's kind of crazy or what have you, I hope you'll kind of jot it down and talk to somebody. I would be more than happy to meet with you and talk about whatever that dream is. And it doesn't have to be a dream can also be during the day, a vision that you have that God gives you that you see, and particularly if it's recurring, it could well be that God is speaking to you just like he was speaking to Joseph. All right, so don't miss out on that. But let's talk. All right, now of course it could be quite clear what your dream means. I mean, that sometimes is, and that's the case here. This was not something that was hard for his brothers to figure out. They said, "Oh, so you're supposed to rule over us. We're supposed to bow down to you." And he also had another dream. Okay, and it's basically the same thing. Verse 9. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" If his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now, not only are Joseph's brothers angry with him, but it says his father, who adores him, right? I mean, we see this, spoiled him to death, is angry with him. He says he rebuked him, and that rebuke is a very strong word, but it basically meant that Joseph's way of telling people his dreams must have been incredibly arrogant and insensitive. Like, nah, 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 nah. I mean, you could kind of hear him throw that into this a little bit, or at least imply that a little bit as he was telling them, look at what God told me. But now, in the last three passages, it is repeatedly stated what? That the brothers hated Joseph. And so what's happened now is this hatred has been building and building and building inside of them. It's been, kind of continuing to pile on and so forth. And that's not a good thing, because that sets the stage for what is about to happen to him. Verse 12. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flock, and Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks, and I'm sending you to them." "Very well," he replied. He's a little naive, all right? He's like, doesn't see anything wrong with that. Anyway, Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Again, remember that these brothers are not some rogue group of outlaws, right? I mean, they're not like, that's just not their job. They're not pirates and so forth. These are the guys that God is going to use to establish the Jewish nation. And they are the guys who ultimately are going to be the 12 tribes of Israel. And yet their hatred, their anger towards their brother is so great that they thought the best way to deal with him was to kill him. And that's just such a tragic thing. Of course, we see that later on, that the church people, the Pharisees, the ones protecting it, thought the best way to deal with Jesus was to kill him, right? So you see some of that same kind of pattern that has formed. All right, but little did they know that their plans to kill him, that they were scheming and stuff, were actually going to lead to the fulfillment of the dreams that Jacob had. And this is the key point, I think, of the whole story. And I'm going to come back to it, but that's what I want you to see, these circumstances that happen, how they line up in order for God to accomplish his plan. Verse 19. "Here comes that dreamer," they said. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him." They knew their dad was going to be upset, right? When Reuben heard this, now Reuben's the oldest one, he said, "Let's not take his life." He said, "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern where here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. Again, Reuben's the oldest one. He shows some compassion here, trying to rescue Joseph. At least he kept the older brothers from killing him, or the other brothers from killing him. Verse 23. "So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, there was no water in it, and they sat down to eat their meal. They looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt." There are a lot of interesting little details taking place, and I'm hoping you're going to notice them. I'm going to try to tie them back together here in a moment, because this is part of what this story, we're going to look at it in a few moments. Verse 26. "Judah said to his brothers, 'What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood.' His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brother pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt." The Ishmaelites opened the door for another brother, Judah, who again was, if you remember the story, Judah was not born to Rachel, but she was born to Rachel's sister, and she's now he's going to be the one in the chosen line, but he now steps in to also be part. We don't really know where Reuben is at this point, but he wasn't there, and so Judah steps in, and he enters the story with a suggestion: rather than leaving Joseph to die, why don't we sell him? Let's get some money for him. So the Ishmaelites, now called the Midianites, also arrive, and Joseph is sold to them for 20 shekels of silver, and they take him to Egypt with them. Spoiler alert, that is the place that Joseph needs to get to in order for God to carry out his plan. That's that's how this is all stringing together. Again, I'm going to come back to it, but first, verse 31. They got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, dipped the robe in blood, then took the robe back to their father. He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him." Then Jacob tore his clothes, which means is a sign of grief and a sign of agony and stuff, and he mourned for many days. All of his children came to comfort him, but he refused. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials. Now that's where this chapter ends. And again, I think the deception and meanness of this family is so hard to believe, but the purpose of this Bible story, and as with all of them, they tell us something, but it's not as much to show us how to live a godly life. We've talked about that, not how to live a good life. The purpose of these stories is to show us how God's grace rescues us despite our wretchedness. That's what we continue to hear and see all the time. The other thing that it shows us is the sovereignty of God. It shows us that God is in control. Did you notice that there's no mention of God in this story, in this part of the story? Not once is it mentioned. He never speaks. He never does anything that's even referred to. He seems to even be completely absent, right? You're looking at all this stuff taking place and you're going, where's God and stuff? And you're going to have difficulty, I think, finding any other chapter in the book of Genesis where God seems to be completely absent. However, he clearly is managing down to the minutest of details every little thing that happened in this story. All the chaotic things, all the terrible things, all the things that seem to make no sense. For example, Jacob decided to send Joseph to his brothers who were grazing the herds at Dothan. Now, at that time, Dothan was a very remote place. And whatever happened there, no one would ever know. And it was so remote that hardly anybody would come by. But yet, they did come by. Of course, when Joseph came and they grabbed him and threw him in, Reuben stepped in and happened to be the one there to save him from being killed because they were about to kill him. But then Judah, the other brother, happened to be there when these Midianites, the Ishmaelites, were coming along, and he's the one that came up with this idea of selling him. And the Ishmaelites just happened, again, to be traveling in the middle of nowhere to where? Egypt, the place where God needed to get him. And they sold him into to Potiphar, who happened to be one of Pharaoh's officials. Now, again, the spoiler alert is that God's plan was to get Joseph there to ultimately save his family. Many of you know what's coming, right? Joseph is in there. He's going to rise in power under Pharaoh, and you got to come back. It's great stuff. But as we will see that happen over the next few chapters. But the point is that every little tiny detail, every one of these coincidences, every one of these circumstances couldn't have been a coincidence. Couldn't have been just a happened circumstance, right? Listen, if any one of them didn't happen, not only does the whole family die, but the Messianic line dies. The whole thing goes away. The whole line of God saving the whole world would die if this hadn't happened. And yet, just imagine being Joseph, having your beautiful coat taken by your angry brothers and then tossed into the cistern before being sold into slavery, and wondering what in the world's going on. Where is God? Right? Where is God? And the words that Joseph famously would speak many chapters from now, I want to go ahead and bring them in at this point. Oh, good. I was going to say, did I leave that out? But these words is what Joseph would speak later on in chapter 50. But you've got to see how important they are even today. It says, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. What you intended for evil, the harm that was intended by their actions, God used it for good. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Those were words that I'm sure he didn't necessarily feel at this point. I'm pretty sure he was scared to death at this point. It's not recorded how he felt, but I'm pretty sure he's asking the same question that probably all of us would have been asking. Where are you, God? You see, the God who gave Joseph the dreams about his family bowing down to him must be somewhere, right? And yet his family, instead of bowing down to him, now was ganging up on him, right? Stealing the coat, selling him into slavery. And he's got to be going, how can all this happen? They're supposed to be bowing down to me. God gave me a dream, gave me two dreams, that they're bowing down to me. And yet this is what's taking place. This is what's happening. And it's not. One of the things that was kind of interesting this week as I was studying for this message, my lovely wife, Jan, asked me about another story in the Bible. And it's a story about a prophet, Elisha, who you may know. A lot of people get him mixed up with Elijah, because that's easy to do, but it's Elisha. Anyway, and guess what happened many years later in this very same place, Dothan. I thought that was interesting, how Dothan became the center of this. Now, we're not talking about Dothan, Alabama, people. I'm just letting you know. This is the original Dothan, all right? But anyway, it's a story about, and so, Jan asked me about this, but it's a story about the prophet Elisha. And guess what happened many years later? Kind of ironic that she asked me this particular week, but it got me to thinking about the question that we ask ourselves when things don't seem to make sense. The where is God question. Check this out. It's the 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 14. It says, then the king sent a strong force by night to Dothan to capture Elisha. When Elisha's servant got up the next morning, he saw that an army surrounded the city. Oh no, my lord, what shall we do? The servant asked. Thankfully, Elisha was there. Don't be afraid, Elisha answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed, open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. When you read this story, you say, how important this is to understanding God's sovereignty. And it says this, and we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to
Jesus, you set me free. Christ my Savior, you rescued me. Thank you, Jesus, you set me free. Christ my